Last week, an article in the weather section of the Washington Post created a bit of a buzz. It documented recent trends in National Weather Service tornado warning performance, and it wasn't exactly complimentary of forecasters. As background, the Weather Service uses 3 measures to evaluate how well it predicts tornadoes. One is lead time. That's the amount of warning given in minutes before a tornado forms. The lead time can be 0 or even negative if the warning comes out after the tornado forms. Now here's a look at the average lead time each year since the late 1980s. Back then, before Doppler radar, the average was just 4 to 6 minutes. But with better technology and better science, that went up to 13 minutes or more by 2003. And that's where it stayed until around 2011. But since then, it's gone down to 8 to 10 minutes the last few years. A second measure is called probability of detection. Pretty straightforward, just the number of tornadoes for which a warning was issued divided by the total number of tornadoes that occur, then multiplied by 100 to turn it into a percent. Clearly, the bigger this number, the better. And here's the probability of detection each year since the late 1980s. Back then, it was around 30%, but it had reached 75% or so by 2002 and stayed there until about 5 years ago. But since then, it's gone down to around 60%. A third measure is the false alarm rate. That's the percent of times a tornado warning is issued, but no tornado occurs. So, for example, if 100 warnings are issued and a tornado forms in 30 of the warned areas, the false alarm rate would be 70%. The lower this number, the better. And here's the trend since the late 1980s. The scale is the same as for probability of detection. The false alarm rate has been pretty consistent over the years, generally 75 to perhaps 80%, but it has gone down over the last decade to an all-time record low of 70%. So summarizing, in recent years, the false alarm rate has improved, but tornado lead time and probability of detection have worsened a bit. So what's going on here? Well, Harold Brooks, a tornado scientist who was on Weather World a few years ago, says the drop in lead time is at least partly due to a change in the tornado warning process. Back in 2012, the typical length of tornado warnings was shortened from 45 to 30 minutes. That alone has to reduce the average lead time. Also in recent years, the Weather Service has focused on reducing false alarms. But by trying not to cry wolf as much, forecasts are missing more of the weaker tornadoes, hurting the probability of detection. Finally, the last few years, the proportion of the weak, harder to predict EF0 and EF1 tornadoes has been slightly above average, and that's likely affected the accuracy statistics. So here's my take on this. Although the decline in tornado warning performance is worrying, I think it can be explained in a way that, in my opinion, means the public is not any less safe when it comes to tornado warnings. Stay tuned. Our extended forecast is next.